Hi everyone, my name is Krishna Soni, and for my social justice issue presentation, my topic is racism in America. I will be specifically looking at the decades of failed reforms and police brutality. Here is our agenda for today. As an introduction, I'd like for you to self-reflect on the following questions. What is racism to you? What are failed reforms? And what is police brutality? As an activity, I'd like you to close your eyes and imagine a prisoner. What does that prisoner look like? What are they dressed as? And why are they in prison? Did you imagine a white woman when you thought of a prisoner? Because many don't, and there's a reason for that we'll get into shortly. Here are the primary goals for this presentation. I hope that by the end of this presentation, you'll be able to understand these 4 aspects of racism in America. We look at the chains of inequity now, which gives tributes to the idea that racism in America is a systemic issue, meaning it's rooted within all aspects of life. Let's start with our first bubble of intersectionality. This is a topic brought to my attention by Kimberly Crenshaw, a professor at UCLA who developed an educational TED Talk. She explains how society seems to remember the names of Black men who were murdered from police brutality, but not the Black women who were also murdered from police brutality. Similarly, we see this intersectionality issue when looking at Emma J. DeGraffenreider's court case. Emma's potential employer hires Black folk and women, yet all of the Black folk were men and all of the women were white. These policies show double discrimination when looking at Emma, who is a Black woman. When Emma took this to court, they refused to fuse the 2 actions together as there was no name for the problem and there was no way to frame it. This is a crack in the law that won't let the law see the issue of the intersectionality of being both Black and a woman. The American healthcare system is another subsection of society that needs to be discussed because it is filled with racist attributes, including its effect on the mistreatment of Black folk. The biases within the medical field translate to significant disparities between Black folk and the white community. Racism in healthcare contributes to the high death rates for people of color in America. This mistreatment coincides with what police brutality mistreatment is like. Likewise, the topic at hand discusses decades of failed reforms within healthcare, which is clearly identified within the healthcare systems. There are actions and measures taken, yet the quality of life of Black folk continues to consist of injustices. There are beliefs that these disparities are long gone, but a recent study showed that 40% of the quality measures were still worse for Black folks than for white folks. This is an issue, and we need to do better. Criminal justice system is also created in racist structures. For example, racial inequalities are in line with the incarceration system. Less than 1 in 100 Americans are in jail, yet for Black men, these odds are only 1 in 4. Black folk make up only 14% of society, yet make up 36% of the prison population. There is reason to suggest that the ways police officers enforce laws are trying to be fair, but unequal enforcement of the laws creates differently accused and arrests. Part of the blame of this is in the criminal justice system, how police officers try to do the right thing, yet unequal enforcement of the law happens regardless. The formal law around different drugs and allies in the racist systems that protect white rich folk and hinder minorities. Hollywood is also dirty through the role the media plays in perpetuating the racism and racist systems within America. The impact of misrepresentation and lack of representation as factors that feed into failed reforms for change is brutal. Police brutality, an experience many minorities face, are misrepresented within the media and not adequately addressed. The need to hire more people of color directors as a way to encourage minority representation and relatable experiences being vocalized within the media is needed. The representation of minority groups and as a stereotype and the errors within the media that mistake minority actresses as other minority actresses and blatantly racist roles within films are given opportunity to be part of is not okay. Not only is it wrong, but these events are traumatizing to the minority body. Bringing these factors into my purpose for discussing racism in America, the media and the film industry play key roles in having the power to educate the public and support minority actors. Yet this does not happen. These realities paint the picture within the BIPOC community that they do not matter as much as the white body, obviously a major issue stemmed in racism. And lastly, housing systems have a history of racial injustices lingered with racist rules and regulations. Within American Apathic, Chapter 1, The Missing Link, it highlights the perceptions, knowledges, and effects of segregation in the United States, one being through the creation of the ghettos. Co-authors Douglas S. Macy and Nancy A. Denton developed the main argument that the urban underclass struggle with poverty, homelessness, drug use, violence, unemployment, and racial inequality due to the apparent dependent variable of residential racial segregation. Although quite visible, the underlying issue of radically segregated sectors within America are argued to have rarely been discussed by civil rights leaders, policymakers, scholars, and journalists. Modern tactics to enforce segregation include political, federal, and marketing companies who invest in a community. Their funds, mindsets, and attitudes are geared toward keeping segregation. Historically, the system works in favor of the folk in power, hence the white folk. While companies and people promote their businesses as equal opportunity, they do not have systems and resources in place to follow through on their claim. In fact, they continue finding ways to support segregation. This is essential to understanding racism in America because it addresses impacts of racist practices and systems that lead to poor living conditions and experiences for Black bodies. So who are the involved parties when we talk about racism in America and decades of failed reforms and police brutality? Well, to start, we need to acknowledge that we are all part of the problem and we can all be part of the solution. Our main focus is looking at policing and looking at the lives of Black people in America. Police officers demonstrating police brutality and therefore causing Mr. George Floyd to no longer be with us, and the uprise of the BLM movement and its connections towards the policing crisis at hand is an extreme experience that we have all faced and a great example of the issue at hand. Racism and systemic racist policing structures allow for this to happen to Mr. Floyd and many other people in the BIPOC community. This heavy policing discusses ways to eliminate race-based discrimination, therefore encouraging race neutrality in the enforcement of law. The quote, "In America, one Black person is killed by police about every 40 hours, and 1 out of 1,000 Black men can expect to be killed by police over the course of their life," is an issue. We often say these strategies are the consequence of a few bad apples, but as Rashawn Ray explains, bad apples come from rotten trees, which are law enforcement agencies embedded with structural racism. Likewise, when we look at the Black body, we look towards Between the World and Me, a nonfiction book that discusses the dangers of being a young Black man. Author Coates talks to his son in this book and asks that his son needs to be twice as good as an average white person in order to be seen as more than a Black body, just showing the realities and horrors of living as a Black human in America. Yet he tells his son to learn to struggle more, and the struggle is a reality of being Black. The book concludes with the idea that America is a country that is lost in the dream that America is God's handiwork. The dreamers won't wake into consciousness because they're unable to feel uncomfortable. These two perspectives are a huge area of focus when dealing with decades of failed reforms and police brutality. We need to acknowledge this. Racism in America is a social justice issue. Please reference this image of what social justice represents and how you are represented within the wheel of power and privilege. The closer you are to the center, the more power you hold. How we can become a better society. We can do this by improving police accountability, knowledge, and taking action. To summarize, this is everyone's fight. I encourage you all to further your knowledge and use these references that I used throughout the video. A big thank you to you all for